Hi, Chem Peeps. We're continuing our final exam review for first year chemistry. After 31 years of teaching, I had a final exam that was anywhere between 75 and 100 multiple choice questions, some application, some understanding, and I've broken down my review into different topics. We're going to talk about naming today. In my classroom, I use the flowchart for naming compounds, and so I'm just going to quickly go over that with you right now so that it can help us with our answering of the questions. And so at the top, the first question that we're going to ask ourselves is, does the formula have only two capital letters? If it does, then we're dealing with two elements, okay? And the first question that I'm going to ask on the left is the first element in the formula a metal? If the answer is no, we're talking about non-metal pairs are covalent, which we're going to use Greek prefixes. I think it's weird, but I did not ask any questions on covalent naming on the test that I'm sharing with you, but I will show you just quickly about naming covalent compounds. If the answer is yes, first element's a metal, the next question is that metal found from family 1 or 2? If it is the alkali or alkaline earth metals, you can just name it, like sodium or magnesium. You don't have to worry about multiple oxidation charges, and then you name the non-metal with an ID ending, like chlorine becomes chloride. If the answer is no, then we need to do cross-up. We need to know the charges of both the metal and the non-metal in this compound and use the Roman numerals for the metal to represent its oxidation state. And that is pretty much what I've asked on my test. So we're going to be sticking to this answer, our outcome on the flow chart. If I do not have two capital letters, in other words, two elements, no, that means I have a polyatomic ion present. And I don't know if your teacher makes you memorize polyatomic ions. I always gave a chart on the test for the kids to use, but you may have to brush up on those. If the metal, the first element, is from family 1 or 2, again, very easy to name. You name the metal like sodium and then the polyatomic ion, which might be like hydroxide or something like that. If it is not from family 1 and 2, the alkaline and alkaline earth metals, we now have to do cross up again because we're dealing with a metal that could have multiple oxidation states. And so I do have examples here. And then, of course, you have to name your polyatomic ion. So I hope that that flowchart might help you. I'll erase this so you can stop and take a screenshot of it if you want to. Okay, so let's look at the questions. I'm going to minimize this so I can have some workspace. It says the chemical name for FeO would be, well, iron, Fe, is not in family 1 or 2. It is a transition metal, so we're going to have to do cross-up. So let's go ahead and do that. So I have iron oxide. I'm going to cross up the subscripts, which there's no number there, so we assume ones. The first one is positive, second one's negative. Do not stop here. You have one more step. You have to check the one on the right to see if it follows the trend. Oxygen comes from family 16. The trend is to be a -2. I must unreduce this ratio. So to get the -1 to a -2, I need to multiply this ratio by 2. And so, oops, this is iron 2 in this case. So we're going to write iron, Roman numeral 2, which represents that +2 charge, and then oxygen gets an ID ending oxide. So the correct answer for this is C. Notice here there is some Latin naming. If you were taught Latin naming, you might want to brush up on that because iron is the lower oxidation state, the iron 2, we would name it ferrous oxide. Just throw that in there. Okay, so that wasn't even an option. Okay, so let's go to the next one, the chemical formula for barium hydroxide. So barium is in family 2. It has a +2 charge. Hydroxide is a polyatomic ion, OH, with a -1. Before I cross down, I must put parentheses around that polyatomic ion to protect its formula. And so when I do cross down, I get Ba parentheses OH parentheses 2. So the correct answer here would be B. All right. Next one. the IUPAC naming, that's just the accepted naming, for SN CrO4 taken twice. So SN is a transition metal. It is not in family 1 or 2. We will have to do cross up. So if I cross up, there's an assumed 1 here, and the 2 comes up here. Everything inside the polyatomic ions left alone. First one's positive, second one's negative. Don't stop here. Check and see what chromate normally is. It is not a -1. It's normally a -2. So we have to unreduce this. So multiply by 2 so that the -1 becomes a -2. So this identifies the tin as not tin 2, but tin 4, and we write it in Roman numerals. And then the poly here is chromate. Okay, so our correct answer here is D. Now, I just think it's weird that I didn't put any covalent compounds on my test, but I didn't. But you do need to know the, oops, come on, wake up. Here we go. You do need to know the Greek prefixes to name a covalent compound. So let's look at some examples. So let's just say I have NO. So these are both nonmetals. So this is covalent. I'm going to use my Greek prefixes. I have 1 nitrogen, so I'm going to say mono nitrogen. And I have 1 oxygen, so it's going to be monooxide. Now, it is accepted that if you have 1 of the first element, you do not have to write mono on it. I can just say nitrogen, but I must, if it's 1 element on the second one, I can't drop the mono. It has to be there. That's just the rule. So both of these would be accepted. So let's look at another example. Same elements, let's say it was N2O3. Well, I have 2 of the nitrogen, so I'm going to say dinitrogen. And I have 3 of the oxygen, so I'm going to say trioxide. And that is how we do Greek prefixes. So didn't ask a lot on naming. It's kind of interjected in the balancing and in formula and math questions when I'm talking about chemicals. So that's probably why I didn't do it. But I hope this helps. Please leave me a like, share, save, or even leave me a comment as to whether this helped or if there's more that you need. Good luck on your finals, and I'll see you on the next video.